Hi everyone, welcome back to the official YouTube channel of the National Law Training Institute. As you all know, I am Anish Gupta, the founder of NLTI and currently in my final year at the National Law School, Bangalore. So this is going to be a very important session. As you can see on my screen, this is a session specifically for NLSAT aspirants, specifically targeting NLSAT 2026. So as you can see, in this session, we are going to discuss or decode the previous year papers of NLSAT. And a lot of people reached out to me to make the video more accessible in terms of the language. So I'll be using Hindi as well as in this session. So please pardon with me. I'll try to make it as accessible as possible for all people. And मैं हिंदी भी use करने वाला हूँ इसमें. तो but if there is anything that you don't understand, please feel free to let us know in the comment section so that we can reply to it separately and ensure that your doubts are cleared. So in this session, as I've told you, this is going to be a very important session. We will be decoding all the previous year papers of NLSAT. NLSAT 2022 में start हुआ था, so there have already been 3-4 editions of the paper NLSAT 22, 23, 24, 25, and now what this means for NLSAT 2026. So we'll be discussing everything in very detail. We'll be discussing part A, we'll be discussing part B, specifically the GK section because a lot of people had doubts pertaining to the GK section as well. So stay tuned with us for the entirety of this session, and I'm sure your confidence will be on the next level after you have watched this entire video and after you start preparing for NLSAT 2026 along the lines of whatever we discussed today. Also, as the second heading suggests, we will also be discussing the 6-month strategy for NLSAT 26 now. October has already started. We are expecting the exam to happen in April. April will go into last month revision, so we are planning the next 6 months in such a way that everything gets covered by March at the latest. So in today's session, we'll also be talking about the next 6-month strategy that I will divide in 2 phases. Phase 1, October, November, December, and the phase 2 that will start from January and last until March. So stay tuned for these very 2 important things that we'll be discussing: NLSAT PYP analysis, that is the previous year papers, as well as the next 6-month strategy. So why even does this matter? Why do we need to discuss or decode NLSAT previous year papers at all? There are 3 to 4 important things that we have mentioned here. It reveals trends. It's very important to know what you are signing up for. If you just go to the NLSAT exam center without knowing what the paper has asked in the previous years, you will be very clueless. You will not understand which section to attempt first, which section to attempt later, how to go about filling the OMR, how to prepare yourself mentally while you are filling or signing up your details in the OMR. So it's very important to understand what NLSAT is, and that is why we are discussing the NLSAT PYP in this session, so that we come to know about the trends. We will track how NLSAT has evolved with each passing year, what changes has NLSAT made from 22 and to the latest edition that was held in April 25. We'll also identify high frequency areas. So discussing or decoding previous year question papers help us identify the high frequency areas. And these are the areas that are most commonly asked, and these are the most common question stems or types that are asked. And we'll also shed light on the GK topics. So NLSAT PYQ discuss करने से हमें पता चलेगा कि NLSAT का focus primarily किन चीजों पर रहता है. Specifically in the GK section, as we'll talk about in the coming few slides, focus is slightly on pop culture, latest movies, latest books, also on international affairs, very contemporary news. तो NLSAT PYQ discuss करने से हमें पता चलेगा कि कहाँ focus है, ताकि for the next 6-7 months we dedicate our focus in these high frequency areas. Think like the examiner, we get to know the logic that the examiner is looking for when they are setting up the paper. We will, after discussing the PYQ, we will build a data-driven strategy. We will focus our energy on the areas only where it is required. Random news नहीं पढ़ेंगे, random compendiums नहीं पढ़ेंगे, random websites नहीं पढ़ेंगे. We'll only discuss and we'll only focus our energy on the most important things that are relevant for NLSAT. So that is where NLSAT PYQ discussion comes into play. And also, as I've already talked about, confidence booster. Familiarity with question patterns reduces surprises in the exam hall. आपको पता होगा कि what you are signing up for, you will exactly know what the paper pattern would be and along what lines the paper is expected to come in the April edition of NLSAT 2026. So now the bigger picture. Before we talk about the PYQ, what actually NLSAT is for all the people who are recently who have recently started preparing for NLSAT or who don't exactly know what NLSAT is. So NLSAT LLB specifically is the entrance examination for the NLSIU's elite 3-year LLB cohort. So every year NLS conducts their National Law School admissions test for the 3-year LLB program. 3-year LLB is different from the 5-year LLB. 5-year LLB people give CLAT to enter NLSIU. CLAT is immediately held after your 12th class, or people also take drop for CLAT. NLSAT on the other hand is the 3-year LLB program which people pursue after they've already done their graduation. So that's the primary difference between NLSAT and CLAT, and NLSAT is for entry into the 3-year LLB cohort. That is different from the 5-year LLB cohort. So what actually is NLSAT? This is the paper pattern. There are two parts. Firstly, there is part A, there is part B. Both parts carry equal marks. Part A 75 marks, part B 75, part B also 75 marks. But the primary difference is in the type of questions. Part A is entirely MCQ, objective. There's a fixed answer to every question that is reflected in the answer key. Part B, on the other hand, is entirely subjective. There will be a factual scenario given to you, or there will be an essay topic given to you, and you are free to write your mind. The number of marks that are awarded to you depends on a lot of factors like your clarity, your grammar, your vocabulary, your argumentation, your issue framing, all of these. But there is no fixed answer. A person can argue for the murderer, or a person can also argue for the victim. So there's no correct answer. That is the primary difference between part A and part B. So part B is MCQ based passages that test law, GK, current affairs, social issues and interdisciplinary topics. This does not primarily test these topics, but the passages that are given in part A are primarily from these topics on law, GK, current affairs, social issues. Part B, on the other hand, is subjective answer testing, in which you have to write and think logically, think legally, analytically. There will be a factual scenario, for example, to give you a very, very concrete example. For example, A murders B and A has now invoked the defense of insanity. There will be a couple of more facts given to you, and now you have to argue whether A is liable for murder or not, or whether he will be covered under any general defenses. So this is a very concrete or very rough example that I have given to you. Facts are more complex, questions are more complicated in part B, in the actual part B exam. You can check out the free blogs and the free YouTube videos that NLT has taken on this topic, so that you get to know what you are signing up for the NLSAT part B section. Total time 150 minutes for 150 marks. So average, it's not that how that works, but for part A you can give around 65 to 70 minutes for part A, and remaining 75 to 80 minutes for your part B. So this is how you have to divide your time. Part A is more important because part A is like your entry to get your part B evaluated. So part A, only 600 sheets are evaluated for part B. So you need to be in the top 600 based on your reservation matrix and all to be eligible for your part B evaluation. So that is why, if you are great at essay writing, a lot of UPSC aspirants that we know, they are very good at essay writing because they have been practicing essay writing for a very long time, but their part A is weak. So you need to work on both part A as well as part B, क्योंकि अगर आपका part A weak रहेगा, if you are not good at reading, if you are not good at comprehending what you are reading, then आपका part B evaluate नहीं होगा. Part A में you need to score at least 50 to 53 based on the previous year's cutoff to get your part B evaluated. So it's equally important to focus your time on both the parts, part A as part B. After you have achieved a good level of comprehension ability and reading speed in part A, then you can obviously focus more on part B, improve your answers, get regular feedback, and see how you can fill in the gaps that are there in your essay writing. So now, what is the trend? So this will be the first thing that we'll be talking about in the NLSAT PYQ discussion today. So what has been the trend? The trend has been that the questions are increasingly passage-centric and contemporary. What is contemporary? Very relevant, very topical, something that has happened in the recent past, something that has happened not in the recent past, but is still very relevant because of the further events that have been following that particular event. For example, Israel-Palestine happened, the conflict happened a long time back, but it's still contemporary and relevant because of the further events that have been following the main primary first event. So the trend has been that the questions are from increasingly topical contemporary passages, And the most important thing is that these passages are not read in isolation. These are not just law passages or current affairs passages. These passages merge politics, society, and global current affairs. So what NLSAT is now trying to do is they are trying to make you think like a lawyer. Even before you have started your law degree from NLS, they want people, or they want to filter people, and they want to encourage people who can actually think like a lawyer to sign up for this paper or to clear this paper, so that only good quality candidates enter the prestigious National Law School Bangalore. तो ये अब बहुत recently हमें देखने को मिल रहा है कि passages are very interdisciplinary. आपको उसमें social angle भी दिखेगा, आपको उसमें cultural angle भी दिखेगा, and आपको उसमें contemporary like GK का angle भी दिखेगा. So that is why it's important for you to read contemporary, relevant, topical news. अगर आज, let's say, for example, to give you a very rough example again, yesterday's news that somebody, an advocate, threw a shoe at Chief Justice of India. So yeah, this is not something that you can read in isolation. That's something that happened in a courtroom. You have to see the caste angle to it. You have to see the constitution angle to it, and you also have to see the criminal action angle to it. Now, caste angle is that there was a phrase that was said by the advocate. A cultural angle to it would be again something related to caste. Then the constitution angle would be that now what can happen to the advocate, and now the criminal angle to it would be provisions of the Bar Council of India Act. How can an advocate be suspended? If not just suspended, what criminal procedures can be initiated against him? So this is how you have to read a particular passage, not just read something in isolation. Ki something happened in courtroom, that's it. Relevant for GK, but also relevant for other sections like essay writing, Part B, legal reasoning questions, and your current critical reasoning and reading comprehension. Now, very important slide, evolution of question types. So in this slide we'll be discussing कि 22 में क्या हुआ था, 23 में क्या हुआ, 24 में क्या हुआ, and in the recent NLSAT exam that was held in 25, उसमें क्या हमें changes देखने को मिले. तो NLSAT 2022 was the first year when NLSAT was introduced. पहला बैच NLS का start हुआ था, and उसी टाइम पे NLSAT का first edition भी हुआ था, that was held in NLSAT 2022. What was there in NLSAT 22? There was a heavier focus on critical reasoning passages. तो CLAT का पेपर अगर आपने सुना है तो NLSAT 22 का पेपर भी बहुत सिमिलर आया था CLAT के पेपर से, क्योंकि उस टाइम पे NLS ने ये सोचा नहीं था कि what type of candidates are they looking for और what type of candidates are actually appearing for exam. तो उन्होंने क्या किया, उन्होंने NLSAT 22 का पेपर बहुत ही CLAT के सिमिलर बना दिया. उसमें बहुत उन्होंने रीडिंग कॉम्प्रिहेंशन डाल दी, क्रिटिकल रीजनिंग के कोर क्वेश्चंस डाल दिए, और बहुत ही कम रेलिवेंस दी इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी अप्रोच को. That because that is seen similarly in CLAT also. CLAT does not generally bother itself with an interdisciplinary approach. कि there is no fixed type of passage that is asked in CLAT. तो same हुआ NLSAT 2022 में भी generic passages आए, but there was core critical reasoning because it was modeled after the CLAT paper. बहुत ही similar paper आया NLSAT 22 का to the CLAT exam. Now 23 में क्या हुआ? The passages became more contemporary, relevant, topical and based on current affairs. तो जो passages आने लगे, that was less very core critical reasoning but more of GK कि अभी recently क्या हुआ. So there is a particular passage, let's say, and now there will be questions following that passage. But the passages that were coming was less fictional, non-fictional, but more of a contemporary, but had a more contemporary and GK general knowledge nature to it. Very contemporary, relevant, topical passages started coming in NLSAT 23. Now 2024, there was a mix of legal political themes plus GK integration. Again, NLSAT 22-23 में GK को बहुत कम emphasis दिया गया था in the paper. The passages were also not very GK based, and GK in itself also did not form a major chunk of the paper. But what started happening in 24 is there was an interdisciplinary approach. Firstly, there was a mix of legal political themes. आपको in isolation में passages नहीं दिखेंगे, कोई भी GK का random passage नहीं दिखेगा. You will see passages that have a legal implication to it and a policy ramification to it as well. तो आपको बहुत ही interdisciplinary approach दिखने को मिली in the NLSAT 2024 paper. And also what happened in that paper was GK को भी ज़्यादा relevance देने लग गए NLSAT के paper में. Like initially we had thought कि 25 marks for GK, 25 for English, 25 for CR. बट दैट वाज नॉट द केस इन NLSAT 22-23 जिसमें जीके इतनी ज्यादा नहीं आई. बट NLSAT 24 में क्या हुआ, जीके भी ज्यादा आने लगी और जो पैसेजेस थे वो भी इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी होने लग गए. जीके ज्यादा क्यों आने लगी? वी आर ऑफ द ओपिनियन बिकॉज NLSAT wants or NLS wants people who are smart, people who are up to date with whatever is happening in India and around the world, and people who are actually good at GK and who can actually decipher what is happening around them. So that is why GK को ज़्यादा focus मिलने लगा from NLSAT 24. Finally, in NLSAT 25, significant rise in social issues, law and context questions. So NLSAT 25 was the final nail in the coffin in which all passages, if you read any passage, they will have a cultural angle to it, they would have a constitutional angle to it, they might have a policy angle to it, or they are either related to law. For example, the PIL question is directly from constitution or law. The Karachi biryani question has a cultural food angle to it. The coaching center passage had a policy ramification to it, ki whether coaching centers are good or bad, what are the implications of coaching centers. So now you see 8 passages, every one of them had another angle to it. They were not just contemporary or topical, they also had a policy ramification to it or some other implication, either for law, for culture, for caste, something or the other. There was an interdisciplinary approach in all the passages that were asked in NLSAT 2025. So the exam has steadily evolved from being abstract to topical, socially embedded questions. Almost every passage in 2025 was tied to governance, rights, or current socio-political debates. So in NLSAT 2026 also we are expecting something along the similar lines. मैक्सिमम 1-2 पैसेज ऐसे होंगे जो आपको आइसोलेशन में नॉन फिक्शन या फिक्शन के दिख जाएंगे, बट अदर देन दैट every other passage will have an interdisciplinary angle to it and will be related to something or the other. So what it means for us, the main takeaway from here is that you have to read diverse. You have to read from credible sources like EPW, IntCon Lawful. I'm not sure if you are aware of this blog, but there is this blog called IntCon Lawful run by Gautam Bhatia, a very renowned lawyer. So read these sites, read Aeon essays, read websites and sources like these to keep yourself up to date with whatever is happening around you, whatever is happening in India, what are the policy or legal issues concerning the Indian framework. तो आपको ऐसी साइट से पढ़ना पड़ेगा so that you are able to acquaint yourselves to the actual type of questions and the passages that will be asked in NLSAT 2026. 2024-25 की अगर बात करें, why are we talking about this separately? क्योंकि 25 अभी बहुत recent exam हुआ है and 25 is the main exam that we have to focus on while we prepare for NLSAT 2026. तो 24 और 25 में ये हो गया कि there was an even bolder integration. Integration of what? Integration of interdisciplinary approaches. Now there was addition of contemporary politics like the Supreme Court and free speech issue. A gag order was issued on that. Global issues पे relevance और focus आने लग गया like the ICC warrants that were issued, the Olympics controversies, AI regulation, and cultural sociology. Like there was a passage on sports and gender. And then there was a passage on identity and food, the biryani one that I recently talked about. So now you see the bolder integration of interdisciplinary and multi-factorial approaches came into play in NLSAT 2025. तो आपको contemporary politics भी दिखेगी, global issues भी दिखेंगे and sociology related passage भी दिखेंगे. And what this means again is आपको isolation में नहीं पढ़ना है. You have to read very diverse and you have to read very contemporary, topical and interdisciplinary passages. Now what happened again in 24-25 from the paper from NLSAT 24 to 25, that GK now is 50 to 60% current affairs from the last 18 months. तो NLSAT 22-23 में क्या हुआ था कि static GK भी काफी हद तक आई थी, but NLSAT 25 में एक तो number of GK questions increased exponentially. 25 की लिमिट हमें बोली गई है NLS की तरफ से that there will be around 25 questions for GK, but NLSAT 25 broke all the records and there were around 30 to 32 questions only from GK, and of these 30 questions 60% of these questions were very current, topical, relevant, and that too from the last 18 months. तो हमारा टेक अवे ये है कि अगर NLSAT का एग्जाम अप्रैल 26 में हो रहा है तो हमें लास्ट 18 मंथ्स की जीके तो अच्छे से पता होनी चाहिए. द जीके, contemporary GK, very topical GK from the last 18 months. This will constitute your 60 to 70% of the current affairs that will be asked in the GK section of NLSAT 26. And this GK is also from issues like space, politics, law, BMS, tech. So this is the idea that we get from NLSAT 25 कि last 18 months की GK हमारे लिए important हो जाती है, और उनमें भी कुछ हम topics identify करने वाले हैं अगली 1-2 slides में कि जो हमारे लिए ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है और हमें पढ़ना बहुत ज्यादा जरूरी हो जाता है. So clear movement towards evaluating law in a social context, not pure doctrinal law. And the paper is less about rote learning and more about being a public intellectual in law. So you've heard about PIL. This is the wordplay that our team has done. So now they are looking for people who can become public intellectual in law, people who keep themselves up to date with whatever is happening in and around the world, offer an interdisciplinary approach, not read anything in isolation, link everything with their policy legal ramifications. So these are the candidates that NLS is looking for, and the paper is also modeled similarly. People who have what NLS is looking for in candidates, only those people are able to clear the exam. Now bridging 22-25. So again 22 में क्या हुआ था? There was very heavy text plus law passages. Static GK was asked based on constitution polity. Questions on separation of powers, PIL as default juridical route. So very that I've told you, very CLAT, similar to CLAT. बहुत ही focus था आपको text में, heavy reading में, कि आपको core critical reasoning concepts आने चाहिए and also static GK आनी चाहिए. But 23 में GK expand हुआ, international plus economical news पे focus होना लगा. For example, there was a question on the WTO's functioning, what the stance of SC was in recent judgments, and the CR weightage climbed. Again, contemporary news बढ़ने लग गई 2023 से, and also the paper was started to move away from what the paper was in NLSAT 2022, because NLS realized that what they are looking for in NLSAT candidates is not what CLAT is looking for in CLAT candidates. So that is why the paper started to move away from being very close to the CLAT pattern. Now 2024 May, there was a surge in technology and policy related passages. For example, AI snake oil passage, there was question about prediction versus generative AI, and the GK was also tied to tech. So again, very contemporary news aane lagi. There was a shift away from static GK because NLS realized that static GK will help no one. It hardly matters what happened in medieval history or what happened in ancient history, but what matters is that people know what is happening currently around the world, because this event or news will have ramifications for the coming few years. Now 25, again clear interdisciplinary pivot. There was food history passage, sport and gender, SC gag orders, and the GK also became very contemporary and global. Again 2025 में जो most important thing ये हुई कि till 24, NLSAT 24, the GK was very confined to the national space कि India में क्या हुआ. But NLSAT 25 went one step ahead to see कि world में क्या हुआ. It started asking on very important questions, obviously like Olympics and ICC, International Criminal Court. But again, the barrier that was there कि India में क्या हुआ, only national news will be asked, was broken, and a greater focus was also given on international happenings around the world. ओवरऑल ट्रेंड लाइन यही रहेगी कि लॉ हैवी 22 से इंटरडिसिप्लिनरी रीजनिंग हो गई है इन NLSAT 25, एंड दिस विल बी द सेम इन NLSAT 26 as well. Now this is the brilliant work that has been done by our team, and this is a very important slide for you to know what to expect in NLSAT 26 and what has been the case from NLSAT 22 to NLSAT 25. So the blue color you see is for the questions asked in NLSAT 22. Red is for NLSAT 23, yellow is for NLSAT 24, and the green one is for NLSAT 25 that was held very recently. Now, what this slide tells you? This slide tells you the types of questions that were asked in the part A of the paper. Part A comprises critical reasoning, reading comprehension, and general knowledge. In this slide, we are focusing more on English comprehension and critical reasoning to identify the most important question stems that have been asked in NLSAT for the past 3 years, and also with a greater focus on what NLSAT 25 offered in the paper. So now these are the most important question stems that we have identified. Inference, text means directly from the passage. Purpose is questions like what is the primary purpose behind author's argument, or why did the author write this particular blog. Weaken is which of the following statements would weaken the argument made by the author. This is like the main idea or the argument presented by the author is mentioned in the question, and now the examiner wants us to identify the sentence or the answer that will weaken the stance taken by the author. Then main point, again very direct questions. What is the main point, or what is the main idea of the writing the passage? Perspective based questions, principle. Strengthening and weakening became very important in NLSAT 2025. We'll talk about that in this slide itself. But NLSAT 2025 में core CR बहुत ज़्यादा आई थी. Core CR से I mean questions related to assumption, questions related to strengthening arguments, questions related to weakening arguments. Strengthening, weakening in particular became a very important concept in NLSAT 25, and a huge chunk of questions was asked from strengthening and weakening concept. Comparison, except, assumption, vocabulary, and miscellaneous. So now, as you can see in NLSAT 22, there was a greater focus on vocabulary. आप देखो कि vocabulary तो NLSAT 25 में पूछी ही नहीं गई है, but क्योंकि NLSAT 22, 23, 24 बहुत ही text heavy थे and similar to CLAT थे, there was a great focus on vocabulary. But now you see NLSAT 2025, you see this line, there is this indent here that a lot of inference questions were asked in NLSAT 2025. What is inference? We'll be discussing about this in the next slide also, but inference is what you can infer from the passage. It is different from a conclusion in the sense that a conclusion is clearly mentioned in the passage, but inference is what you take away from the passage. This is something that stays with you even after you have read the entire passage and you have read the conclusion. This is what your natural key takeaway, or what naturally follows from a particular passage, that is your inference. And that was asked multiple times in the NLSAT 25 paper. Almost 11 questions were asked indirectly or directly from this concept called inference. It can be either very direct, that what is the inference drawn, but it can also be disguised in other words. But what the paper is actually asking you is what your primary inference is. Text based, again around 9 questions were text based. Text based means directly from the passage. आपको बस अच्छे से passage read करना है. You have to be very attentive while reading the passage, and you have to know clearly what is written where in the passage to answer the text based questions. Around 7 questions were also asked based on the purpose. So purpose becomes very important to identify the main idea also, क्योंकि अगर आपको purpose पता होगा that why has the author written this particular piece, you will also know the main idea or the main argument behind that particular blog. तो आपको purpose identify करना बहुत important हो जाता है कि why has the author even written this paper or news in the first place. So purpose was also asked, that what is the primary purpose behind an author's argument, or what is the primary purpose behind the author saying a particular thing. Again, as I've already told you, weakening and strengthening. Around 10 questions were directly asked from strengthening and weakening arguments. So strengthening and weakening में होता क्या है कि आपको एक argument दिया जाता है, और you have to first identify the argument that is made by the author. For example, I am arguing that Karachi biryani has a special place in heart of all Indian Muslims. Now I have to either weaken the argument, or I have to either strengthen the argument, and there will be 4 answer options that will be either weakening it or strengthening it, and I have to identify the most appropriate one. So this is how strengthening and weakening arguments work. And in NLSAT 25, around 10 questions were asked. Around 10 questions were directly asked from strengthening and weakening arguments. You can go through this slide at your own pace. I will move aside a bit so that you can take a screenshot or whatever you want to do with this slide. This becomes very important to identify and understand what type of questions can be asked in NLSAT 2026 also. So this slide has broken down everything in detail कि NLSAT 22 में क्या पूछा था, 23 में क्या पूछा था, and 24 and 25 what all questions were asked. broken down into specific question stems. And this slide will give you enough guidance on what NLSAT 2026 will also ask. To tell you in brief, NLSAT 2026 may expect a huge focus on inference, assumption, strengthening, weakening, main point, and directly text-based questions. So this is the NLSAT 2025 complete breakdown. Because this paper was recently held, this is the primary paper that is in focus for us. So what was asked in NLSAT 2025? As I've already told you, around 24% questions, around 24% questions were from inference, 20% questions directly text-based, around 15% based on purpose, that what is the primary purpose, around 7 on strengthening, 6.4 on comparison-based, principle-based, perspective-based, main point, and around 13% on weakening. Again, strengthening, weakening, almost 20-25% questions were asked from strengthening, weakening. So this is the primary paper in focus for us, because NLSAT 25 is the latest benchmark or the paper based on which our NLSAT 2026 predictions will follow. तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. आप देख लीजिए यहाँ पे कौन कौन से क्वेश्चन स्टेम्स have been asked, and these question stems have the highest probability of being repeated in NLSAT 2026. Now to tell you, to give you a little more insight into how these questions actually work, I have brought with me specific examples from the NLSAT 2025 paper, because till now we were discussing everything in very abstract detail कि inference पूछा जाएगा, text based question पूछे जाएंगे, strengthening, weakening पूछे जाएंगे. But in the next couple of slides, we'll be breaking down each concept की actually strengthening, weakening क्या होता है, और actually inference questions होते कैसे है, and actually paper में दिखते कैसे, because you'll know that inference based questions are asked, but until you know how that question looks like in the actual paper, you'll get lost and you'll not be able to figure out that this question is actually asking you for your inference. So again, PYP in focus is NLSAT 25. We are focusing on that one primarily. Around 24% questions in part A were from inference, directly or indirectly. And what is inference? It asks you to go beyond what's stated and what logically follows. This is the primary difference between a conclusion and an inference also. Conclusions are mostly mentioned explicitly in the passage, whereas inference is something that you take away, or what logically follows after a conclusion. This is something that stays with you even after you have read the passage. So, to give you an example of a question asked on inference in NLSAT 25, this is question number 3 from the master booklet. What inference can be drawn about the author's view of voter rationality? Now, this is an inference that you can draw only after properly reading the passage, after you've understood the intro, you have understood the argument, then the conclusion. After that, you'll be able to identify the inference as well. Now, coming to text-based questions. So, inference तो फिर भी सबको पता चल जाता है कि inference होता क्या है, but what do I mean when I talk about directly text-based questions? So, text-based questions are those questions that are directly from passages. There is no external knowledge needed at all. Leave alone any external knowledge, आपको अपना दिमाग भी नहीं लगाना होता. There is no application of mind also. All it requires is some attentive reading. आपको अच्छे से passage पढ़ा होना चाहिए, and you should have not missed out on any detail while reading the passage. Now, example from the paper, NLSAT 2025 paper, these are text-based questions. Around 20% of the questions were of this type, directly from the passage. And now, if you see, this is the first. I think this is the first question of the paper itself. Based on the passage, which of the following best describes how most voters approach voting? आपको on the face of it लग रहा होगा कि बहुत inference based, conclusion based या assumption based question है, but not at all. This is a question that was directly given in the passage, and all you had to do was to do some attentive reading. And now, based on the passage, which of the following best describes how most approachers approach voting? Now, the answer is given directly in the passage. They use the franchise as a form of self-expression. So now, the answer is given directly in the passage that most voters approach voting as a form of self-expression, and the same is given in the answer options as well. You can see answer option B. Based on the passage, which of the following best describes how most voters approach voting? And answer number B is a form of self-expression and identity affirmation. So it's directly given in the passage, and these type of questions are frequently asked in the paper, and these are free marks. All you have to do is you have to read attentively. Like here you can see in the passage it's directly given that voters use franchise as a form of self-expression. Another example from the NLSAT 2025 paper, I think this is from the Karachi biryani passage. So the question was, what according to the author is an essential attribute of a biryani? Here, as you can see in the passage, all of these built of the first fundamental combination of rice with fat and protein. So the passage has directly talked about how biryani is made, or what is an essential attribute of biryani, and it says that an essential attribute of biryani is a fundamental combination of rice with fat and protein. And here answer option A, sorry, it is a combination of rice with fat and protein. So these are the questions that are directly from the passage, directly text-based questions. These are the marks you must not lose. They demand attentive reading and not prior knowledge. All you have to do is you have to read the passage very properly. You have to be very attentive while reading the passage, and almost 20% of the questions will be like these that are directly asked from the passage. तो आपको बिल्कुल ना ही दिमाग लगाना है, ना ही external knowledge use करनी है. Now we also talked about core critical reasoning questions like assumption, strengthening, weakening, and conclusion, inference. But again, to give you an example of how these things work in practice, so around 20 to 25% questions in NLSAT 25 were asked from these core critical reasoning concepts like strengthening, weakening, and assumptions. And how does this question work? Is that it is directly given that now which of the following statements will weaken the author's argument. So for example, this is question number 9 from the master booklet. The authors suggest that the success of coaching institutes depend on the predictability of examinations. Now what the question has done, it has given you the core argument or the central argument that is given by the author. Now in the second line, what it is asking you to do is, which of the following, if true, would weaken the author's argument? Now after telling you the author's argument, it is asking you to weaken the argument made by the author by selecting the most appropriate option. So one of these 4 options will weaken what the author has argued. And what has he argued is that coaching institutes depend on the predictability of examinations, which is actually true, because if, for example, NLSAT 2026 is not predictable, then there is no point discussing NLSAT 2025, and then there is no point of even running a course for NLSAT because we won't know what the syllabus is. That is why the author's argument is this, and now we have to weaken the argument. Moving on to the next question, that is question 23 of the master booklet. Similar to what was question 9, the passage argues that the centralization of political power has affected the role of Supreme Court. Which of the following would weaken this argument? Again, what this question does is give you the argument made by the author and now asks you to weaken the argument. How would strengthening work? Similar to this, the argument would be given to you, or sometimes it will not be given to you, and you will be simply asked which of the following strengthens the argument made by the author. So this is how weakening and strengthening work. Now coming to a very important thing again, we'll talk about the GK trends from NLSAT 22 to NLSAT 25 and what has stayed constant. Distribution, law, and constitution. For every year that NLSAT has taken place, that is NLSAT 22 to NLSAT 25, law, constitution, something related to judiciary has always found a place in the paper. Around 25 to 30% questions are related to law, governance, judiciary, or constitution. Similarly, polity and governance, a regular citing in the paper, questions related to election commission, federalism, Supreme Court, the collegium system, all these things are again regular sightseeings in the NLSAT paper. Now international current affairs, as we have talked about, NLSAT 22-23, there was less significance of international current affairs, but post NLSAT 24 and specifically in NLSAT 25, an increased significance or reliance is given to international current affairs. So international current affairs become very relevant for you, especially in today's context where every other day Trump is doing something or the other. Israel-Palestine conflict is escalating. Russia-Ukraine is happening. So international current affairs do become very important in the heated international context that we today live in. ICC arrest, Pakistan politics, AI lawsuits, Olympics, etc. These become very important. Especially sports also, like last year Olympics was asked, there's a possibility that next year something about Asia Cup can be asked, something about the next Olympics can be asked. So it's all in the pipeline. Sports is something that NLSAT has not particularly relied upon in very detail, but it's something that we cannot skip at all. Society and culture, news focus like food history, sports and gender, coaching industry. So again, passages from these similar topics are also asked. Again, in GK section also, the approach is very simple. It's interdisciplinary. आपको कोई isolation में passage नहीं आएगा और question नहीं आएगा. Whatever question will be asked to you will be in context to the passage in which the question has been asked. So आपको बहुत ही interdisciplinary approach रखनी है. Again, that I have told you. अगर आप कोई passage पढ़ रहे हो, for example, if you are reading about the shoe being thrown at Chief Justice of India, you have to read all ramifications or implications of that particular article. आपको GK का भी पता होना चाहिए. Supreme Court was established under which article? How can a Supreme Court justice be removed? What is the term of a Supreme Court judge? So everything related to a particular topic you need to understand while you are reading. So be very open, read diverse, and don't restrict yourself to a particular angle of a topic. Read everything about it. Key insight, again, GK isn't isolated trivia, it's embedded inside a legal political narrative. For example, 22-23 there was a question about democracy, judicial role in migrant crisis. 24 had a reliance on international current affairs, as we've talked about. There was a question about AI, there was a question about predictive tech, snake oil. Again, 25 there was a focus on, again, in international news and interdisciplinary approach, and a focus on free speech, gag orders, Bhashini AI that was recently incorporated by the government agencies and the elections. Now, again, brilliant work done by the team here. I will move aside so that you can take a screenshot. This particular slide talks about all the types of questions that have been asked from NLSAT 22 to NLSAT 25, broken down into simple question stems. For example, person in news, that, for example, a recent person died, why was the person in news? National affairs, international affairs, legal political affairs, art, culture and awards, that I talked about very in my opening remarks, that there is a reliance or trend of asking pop culture, recent books, recent movies. So art, culture, awards, sports, economy, business reports, science and technology, and miscellaneous. Now, we'll talk about NLSAT 2025 primarily. So NLSAT 25 had around 5 questions on the person in news. That a particular person X was in news, why was that person in news? Or a particular person did this, who was in news, who is that person? So you have to identify the person. Now around 8 questions on national affairs, around 4 questions from international affairs. There was no question on legal and political affairs. You can see in NLSAT 22, as I told you, NLSAT 22 was very similar to CLAT and very dependent on, let's say, text heavy, constitution heavy. So there was a focus on legal and political affairs in NLSAT 22. But after that, in NLSAT 24 and 25, there has been no question asked on legal and political affairs, primarily because these are very contentious, and again, they don't want to trigger any person or any other entity. However, a constant feature that emerges is this one: arts, culture and awards. For the last 4 years, NLSAT has consecutively asked questions from this topic pertaining to art, culture and awards. For example, the Bharat Ratna, Padma Bhushan, the Nobel Peace Prize, culture, art. For example, a particular painting was in news recently. Identify the maker of that art, or which painting are we referring to. So this has been a recurring concept or a recurring topic that is there in NLSAT, and the NLTI GK compendium that we provide for the GK section reflects this particular topic in very detail, so that all our NLSAT students are prepared for this particular section. Again, sports. Surprisingly, NLSAT 25 had a huge influx of sports related news, primarily because Olympics and all had taken place. But other than that, sports is a rare sighting in NLSAT paper. There was no question in the sports section in NLSAT 22, and again no question in NLSAT 24. But there was a question in NLSAT 23, and NLSAT 2025 had 6 questions. So sports do become important topic for you, but only if there was a landmark event that had taken place, like the Olympics. Now, economy business reports, no question asked in NLSAT 25, but questions have been frequently asked in NLSAT 22, 23, 24. So maybe it becomes important or maybe not, depends on the time you have to prepare for these topics. Reports, when I talk about reports, these are like the global food hunger index report or the human development index report. These are the reports that are released by government agencies and non-governmental agencies and also international institutions. So these do become important for CLAT, but in NLSAT 25, no question was asked on this. Science and technology, very important. Science and technology is important and a recurring topic in NLSAT, and miscellaneous form a minuscule of what is asked in the GK section of NLSAT. Now, evolution of Part B. Part B, unfortunately or fortunately, is not made publicly available. So whatever we have written today is based on the memory reproduction of the questions that have been asked in NLSAT for the past 3-4 years. But what is the trend is that in NLSAT 22-23, again, because this was the first time the paper was held, बहुत ही जनरल एसेस थे, बहुत ही जेनेरिक क्वेश्चंस थे एंड मोस्टली इंटरप्रेटेटिव क्वेश्चंस थे. आपको फैक्ट्स पढ़ने थे और आपको आर्ग्यू करना था. देयर वाज नो critical or analytical thinking that was involved mostly in these questions. But 24 में क्या हुआ? Shift towards applied analytical reasoning. Facts became more complicated and the expectation level also arose. You were expected to properly engage with the Part B question. प्रॉपर स्ट्रक्चर मेंटेन करना है, प्रॉपर कंक्लूजन प्रोवाइड करनी है, प्रॉपर क्रिटिक करना है आर्ग्यूमेंट का, प्रॉपर काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट देना है. सो द क्वेश्चंस became more complicated, the level of difficulty increased and also the expectation increased. And 2025 was the final nail again. All questions mirror law in society debates, for example PIL, coaching industry, air regulation. I don't know why this is mentioned in Part A, Part B, but these are Part A questions. But even in Part B, you will see a very interdisciplinary approach again in Part B. All questions had either an international angle to it or a social angle to it. So again, Part B became very analytical, complex, with a huge increased focus on interdisciplinary approach. Part B has evolved from generic essays to complex policy law discussions. Candidates, for example, in 2025, candidates had to assess the role of PIL in migrant rights or analyze free speech restrictions. तो बहुत ही डिफरेंट लेवल ऑफ क्वेश्चंस आए थे इन NLSAT 25. बहुत ही ऐसे क्वेश्चंस थे which had links or were integrated with the socio-political debates that are currently ongoing in the country. तो आइसोलेशन में आपको क्वेश्चन नहीं दिखेगा, आपको अगेन पार्ट बी में ऐसे क्वेश्चंस ही दिखेंगे जिनका बहुत ही contemporary relevance है. For example, there was the essay on 3-language policy. There was an essay on whether social media should be banned for children, or whether domestic help should be paid or not. So these types of questions are asked because all these are very relevant, topical, and have a policy or social ramification to it. Now, very important, what are the skills that NLSAT is primarily looking for in the candidates who appear for this exam? Passage absorption, how well you are able to read the passage and understand the passage, because these are long, dense passages. तो आप कितने अच्छे से एक पैसेज पढ़ सकते हो, जो आपने पढ़ा है उसको कितने अच्छे से रिटेन कर सकते हो, और कितने जल्दी से पैसेज पढ़ सकते हो. So 3 skills are being tested: your reading speed, your comprehension ability, and your ability to retain. Because every time you read a question, you will not go back to the passage to read it again. तो आपको retain भी करना important है whatever you have read. Skill is to distill quickly. आपको जल्दी से आइडेंटिफाई करना है ऑथर का आर्ग्यूमेंट का है एंड फिल्टर इट फ्रॉम द अदर क्लटर दैट इज आस्क्ड, दैट इज गिवन इन अ पर्टिकुलर पैसेज. तो आपको जल्दी से आइडेंटिफाई करना है कि अच्छा ये पैसेज मैंने पढ़ा है, तो ये ऑथर की असम्पशन हो सकती है, ये ऑथर की कंक्लूजन है, ये ऑथर का इन्फरेंस है, ये ऑथर का मेन आइडिया है. सो वंस यू रीड अ पर्टिकुलर पैसेज, ये 3-4 चीजें आपको खुद ही सोच लेनी चाहिए इवन बिफोर अ क्वेश्चन इज आस्क्ड ऑन दैट, बिकॉज अ क्वेश्चन डेफिनेटली विल बी आस्क्ड फ्रॉम 4 of these things. तो जैसे ही आपने एक पैसेज पढ़ा, फॉर एग्जाम्पल, understand and tell yourself the main idea. This is the conclusion, this is the inference, this is the assumption that the author is making, and this is the premise that, or the facts that the author is using to make that particular argument. Critical reasoning is the second skill that is being tested. Your ability to infer, assume, strengthening and weakening arguments. You have to think like a lawyer reading an editorial. You don't have to read passively, you have to read actively. अगर आप कुछ पढ़ रहे हो You don't have to read just for the sake of it, that you are reading and retaining. You have to actively think and engage with it. If you are reading a particular passage, you have to actively think about it. Why is the author saying what the author is saying? What is a possible counter argument to it? What is a possible critique to it? Why is the author saying that? What are the other alternatives available to what the author is saying? So you have to actively engage and think like a lawyer. Thirdly, GK is again a very crucial skill that is being tested, because questions are not merely in the passage, but they go beyond it. You have to be aware of events that are happening around you, be it national, be it international. You have to maintain proficiency in the GK section, and you can do that by reading newspaper, relying on NLTI GK compendium or other free sources, GK sources available on the website. Legal social writing, part B, you have to write essays, you have to write part B answers, and you have to write and analyze properly. What the skill is being tested here is a structured analytical writing. Anyone can write a 200-word answer to a part B problem or a 300-word essay based on a contemporary topic. But what NLSAT wants you to write is with a clear structure. You first have to provide an intro, that this is the context in which I am writing and what is the issue that I am trying to address. Issue framing is very important. For example, in the murder question that I talked about, an appropriate issue for that question would be whether A can claim a general defense of insanity, instead of framing a very generic issue of whether A is liable for murder. Whether A is liable for murder is the question that you are answering, but the issue that you are framing is whether A can invoke the general defense of insanity. So this is how issue framing becomes very important. Argument, you have to properly structure your argument. You have to integrate it with law, policy and cultural, social angle to it. You cannot just provide a legal answer. You have to integrate it with other ramifications that your answer has with other fields. And you also have to provide a counter argument and critique. Just mentioning that A is liable for murder or A is not liable for murder is not enough. You have to also mention the possible critique or counter arguments that can be made from the other side. So you have to provide you have to provide counter arguments, but the conclusion should be balanced in the sense that you have to clearly specify your stance, that this is the stance that I am taking, this is the argument that I have made, and even though there is a possible critique to the argument that I am making, my argument still stands. So this is how you have to structure your part B answer. Now, this is all from the NLSAT PYQ discussion कि 2022 से लेके 2025 में हुआ क्या है. But now, what this means for us and how do we prepare ourselves for NLSAT 26 is what we'll be discussing in the next couple of slides. So, as I've already told you, around 7 months are left. But in today's video, we'll be discussing for the next 6 months, because we wish or we hope that you all complete your syllabus and you all be ready by March, because we don't know the NLSAT 2026 exam date yet. It can happen in March also, it can happen in April also, but the higher possibility is of it's happening in April. But still, for the next 6 months, this is the strategy that you have to follow to get a good rank in NLSAT and get your selection in the National Law School Bangalore. So I've divided the next 6 months into 2 phases. Phase 1, that is months 1 to 3, October, November, December. That is your phase 1. And what you have to do here is you have to read daily newspaper. I cannot overstate the importance of reading newspaper. This is the only non-negotiable that you have for your NLSAT 2026 preparation. You can still delay your GK section prep, you can still delay reading other things, or you can still delay your essay practice. But what you cannot delay or what you cannot not do is reading newspaper. You have to read newspaper. Newspaper, which one? There are 2 options. Either you can go for the Hindu or you can go for the Indian Express. So these are the 2 newspapers that we at NLTI suggest for all NLSAT aspirants. You have to read daily newspaper. One, passage reading. As I have told you, the questions are very contemporary and topical. So you have to read the editorials that are asked in the newspaper. But what you also have to do is you have to read diverse. You have to read from diverse sources like EPW, that is Economics and Political Review. You can read SC judgment extracts if there is a very relevant judgment that is coming. and I've also told you a new source, that is the Intcon Lawful blog that is run by Gautam Bhatia. So you have to read one passage at least daily from these diverse sources. Then what you have to do is you have to give sectional tests and you have to solve questions, because just reading passages will not help you with anything. You need to know your you need to identify your weak areas. You need to know how well you are able to solve questions under pressure when there is a pressure of time as well as accuracy. So what you need to do for that, you have to solve sectional tests. Sectional tests are available in the NLTI course, but if you don't have access to our course, you can go for other sources like GMAT also, or Khan Academy, where you can get CR or English sectionals. But this is very important for you to improve your reading speed and your comprehension abilities, क्योंकि अगर आप CR का sectional दोगे, आपको तभी पता चलेगा कि आप assumptions में weak हो या आप conclusion में weak हो, or the problem lies with your speed or the problem lies with your accuracy. This is only possible if you constantly give sectional tests, and you have to give sectional tests for the next 3 months in the foundation phase or the phase 1 of your prep. GK focus on law, policy, international affairs capsules. You can rely on the NLTI GK compendium. It's entirely relevant for NLSAT, and it's the only thing you will need for your NLSAT GK preparation. Even in NLSAT 25, around 20 to 22 questions were directly given in the NLTI GK compendiums. So we formulate or we design our compendium in such a way that everything that is required or expected of NLSAT is provided in the GK news, in the compendium. Essay is very important. Essay practice is very important. You have to practice one essay per week at least for the next 3 months. You need to be in your groove of writing long answers and also writing quality answers, and for that, one essay per week practice is must. And then, very important, you have to give 2 full-length mocks every month. Again, this is also a non-negotiable. Mock आपको अभी से देने शुरू करने पड़ेंगे, otherwise it will be too late. For now, you can keep your frequency at only 2 mocks a month, but we will increase that later in the last phase of our preparation. But for now, for the next 3 months, please target at least 5 to 6 mocks, because only then you will understand where you are performing among your peers, among your competition. So it's very important that you give mocks as well. NLTI full-length mocks are available. We provide 25 full-length mocks. So if you don't have access to any other mock, you can come to NLTI and appear for our mocks. Most of the NLSAT aspirants only appear for NLTI mocks, and the quality of competition in NLTI mocks is quite high, and you will understand precisely where you are performing and how you are performing. So in the phase 2, that is months of January, February and March, you have to give at least 3 mocks a month. So mock every 10 days means 3 mocks a month. So this is a must. So in total, for the next 7-8 months, you have to target around 15 to 20 mocks. This is a non-negotiable for you. आपको 15 से 20 mocks देने ही देने हैं, because if not, you will be very clueless in your NLSAT 26 paper. आपको समझ नहीं आएगा कि what is the paper, how do I approach it and how do I ace it. तो mocks देने बहुत important होते हैं to get familiar with the actual paper pattern and understand what your competition is and where are you right now in that competition pool. Essay drills on complex themes, writing essays on complex themes like which have an interdisciplinary junction of law, politics, society, culture is very important. Focus on GK consolidation, revise your last 7-8 months notes, create a journal, create your own notes, so that 1 month before the exam you don't have to rely on multiple sources. एक अपना journal बनाओ, एक अपनी notebook बनाओ, or if you prefer online notes, you just need to have one concise doc in which GK of all last relevant 7-8 months are there. 2 to 3 writing drills every week at least. You have to write part B answers, you have to write essays. All of this gets covered if you are giving a mock, because part B answers are also covered in the mock, essays are also covered, and your sectional solving or part A solving is also included. तो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा mocks दो जितने आप दे सकते हो. At least target 15 mocks in the next 7-8 months, because that's very essential for your prep. Work on the feedback received on essays. At NLTI, we provide you detailed feedback and evaluation similar to the NLSAT evaluation metric. तो आप कोई भी आंसर लिखते हो या कोई भी ऐसे लिखते हो हमारे मॉक का, तो आपको उसमें एक डिटेल्ड फीडबैक इवैल्यूएशन मिलेगा कि आपने ये बहुत अच्छा किया या आपने गलत किया या आप इसको ऐसे इंप्रूव कर सकते हो. सो इट्स अ प्रॉपर डिटेल्ड इवैल्यूएशन एंड फीडबैक दैट वी गिव. This is given by NLSAT toppers of previous years who are currently NLTI mentors and studying in the National Law School Bangalore. So now that was it from today's session. We have decoded the last 3 years NLSAT paper pattern, the previous year papers for the last 3-4 years. And now where does NLTI fit into this? We know part A is important, we know part B is important, we know mocks are important, we also know GK is important. So how can NLTI help you in this? How can NLTI improve your chances of cracking NLSAT? These are the 5 important things that we do. We provide you dedicated coaching and mentorship by NLSIU students. Our mentors, our NLTI mentors are all NLSAT toppers of past years. A lot of people who are mentoring this year were NLTI students themselves last year. So you will get dedicated coaching and mentorship by people who have actually cracked the exam. So this exam is very new. It's still very in its nascent stage. Nobody knows what the paper expectations are except us, because we have been the ones in this industry for the last 4 years. We have seen we have produced toppers after toppers in the NLSAT industry for the last 3-4 years. All our people, all our students, all our mentors are currently in the National Law School Bangalore who were NLSAT toppers in the previous years. So that is why we exactly know what the paper expects of you and what will be asked in the next edition. 25 full length mocks plus 50 sectionals. We cover all your needs when it comes to sectionals and mocks. We will provide you detailed feedback and evaluation for part B. You will properly get to know where you are lacking in part B, how you can improve your answers, where are you lagging, what is the scope of improvement, and exactly how you can improve your answers. PYP driven pedagogy, all our modules, so the hard copy modules that we provide are exactly based on the PYQ pattern. We will tell you, or the modules that we provide are exactly relevant to the NLSAT examination. We are not like other coaching institutes who recycle their CLAT material and provide for NLSAT. We have an NLSAT specific team, and all we do is that is relevant for NLSAT. We have a proven track record in the last 3 years. Since the time NLTI has started its NLSAT course, we have been producing the best results. In NLSAT 2025, we produced 9 out of top 10 ranks. So imagine rank 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all were from NLTI. And out of the total 120 seats that are there in the National Law School Bangalore based on the NLSAT examination, 65 seats were grabbed by people who were enrolled in NLTI or NLTI students. 65 out of 120 students who got admitted this year in the NLSAT, in the NLS course, 3-year course, were from NLTI. So that is it from today's session. We hope you found this session productive, useful, enlightening, and insightful. If you have any comments, feedback for us, please let us know in the comment section, and we'll be happy to bring more such sessions for you in the future. So thank you so much. This is Anish, the founder of National Law Training Institute, and again, thanks so much for joining.